On December 8, 1980, former Beatle John Lennon was gunned down outside his home in New York.
Remaining, John Smith is on the line, and I don't care what's on the line, Howard. You have got to say what we know in the booth.
Yes, we have to say it. Remember, this is just a football game, no matter who wins or loses. An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival.
Mark David Chapman, arrested at the scene, was portrayed as a lone gunman. He said The Catcher in the Rye, a novel about youthful alienation by J.D. Salinger, was his statement. Chapman soon became yet another disturbed lone gunman like Lee Harvey Oswald, Sirhan Sirhan, John Hinckley Jr., and others. In 2000, author Phil Strongman published John Lennon, Life, Times, and Assassination. In the book, he claims Chapman was a CIA programmed assassin, and Lennon was killed on the orders of what Strongman describes as ultra-conservative political operatives. The author writes Chapman was in Beirut, Lebanon, when the CIA ran an assassination program. The existence of this program is documented in Leslie Coburn's book Out of Control and Joseph Trento's Prelude to Terror. The program came under scrutiny when the Israeli Mossad and the CIA collaborated on the assassination of the military chief of Hezbollah in Lebanon in 2008. The murder impressed then-President George W. Bush, and he decided to pour resources into the program. It was kept secret from Congress for 7 years. Leon Panetta told congressional investigators Bush had the mercenary group Blackwater run the program after 9/11. It's hardly a secret the CIA engaged in assassination. It's well known the agency worked to create brainwashed assassins with its MKUltra program. It was officially launched in 1953 to develop interrogation techniques, as well as to explore the possibility of creating a programmable assassin. 44 universities, 12 hospitals, and 3 prisons collaborated on the experiments. Because many MKUltra documents were destroyed by the CIA in 1973, we will never know how extensive or successful the program was. However, we do know the CIA managed to hypnotize at least 2 women. One was instructed to kill another woman with an unloaded gun, and a second was triggered with a code word by telephone to plant a suitcase bomb. Strongman believes Catcher in the Rye may have been the trigger used to set Chapman in motion. Police said he resembled a zombie when they arrested him. NYPD Lieutenant Arthur O'Connor said Chapman looked like he could have been programmed. In legal papers submitted in 2011, the convicted assassin of Robert Kennedy, Sirhan Sirhan, said he was manipulated by a seductive woman in a polka dot dress. During an interview while under hypnosis, Sirhan said that on cue by the woman, he went into range mode, believing he was at a firing range and seeing circles with targets. Some witnesses stated that they observed a woman in a polka dot dress in various locations throughout the Ambassador Hotel before and after the assassination. Kennedy campaign worker Sandra Serrano said she saw the woman in the polka dot dress running from the scene after Kennedy was shot. Some believe Chapman wasn't in fact the gunman, that he was instead a mind-controlled patsy. There's evidence Chapman in fact did not fire the shots that killed John Lennon. Researchers point to Jose Perdomo, a Cuban exile recruited by the CIA for its Operation 40 assassination team. It's connected to the JFK assassination. Perdomo was working as a doorman at the Dakota the night Lennon was killed. The Perdomo connection was ignored until 1987, when James R. Gaines wrote, "In the shadows, a killer waited," for People magazine. Another suspicious connection is World Vision, an evangelical charity that had John Hinckley Sr., CEO of Vanderbilt Energy Corporation, on its board. Hinckley was a close friend of George H.W. Bush, a former director of the CIA. Hinckley's son, John, tried to assassinate President Reagan. Chapman worked with Vietnamese refugees at a resettlement camp at Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. The program was run by World Vision. World Vision had collaborated on CIA black projects, including the use of one of its camps in Honduras as a recruiting center for the Nicaraguan Contras. In Cuba, World Vision concealed the work of Alpha 66, later implicated in the CIA's failed Bay of Pigs operation to overthrow Fidel Castro. Another suspicious detail centers on Chapman's travels. He visited Tokyo, Seoul, Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, Delhi, Beirut, Geneva, London, Paris, and Dublin. It's not explained how Chapman financed these trips at a time when he was penniless. John Lennon was shot on the left side, and Chapman allegedly fired from him on the right. This oddity was never sufficiently explained. One of Chapman's court-appointed psychiatrists was Dr. Milton Kline, a clinical psychiatrist and an authority on hypnosis. Alex Constantine writes that Kline was a CIA consultant on the creation of program killers, while president of the American Society for Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis. He believed in the concept of Manchurian Candidate program killers, and said he was capable of creating a hypnotically driven patsy in 3 months, a mind-controlled assassin in 6. Another psychiatrist appointed to evaluate Chapman was Dr. Bernard Diamond from the University of California at Berkeley, where mind control experiments were conducted. He had also been appointed to evaluate RFK's accused assassin. Diamond was an MKUltra veteran.
I think all our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. You know? Yeah. And I think that's what I sussed when I was 16 and 12 way down the line, but I expressed it differently all through my life.
The battle is always lost within the castle, you know, like America's falling within, not from the commies coming. Yeah. It's falling apart inside.
John Lennon was considered a threat to the national security state. His leftist and anti-war political views influenced millions of Americans. Lennon was involved in political activism across the board. He was a major contributor to radical causes on both sides of the Atlantic. He paid the fines for activists arrested during anti-apartheid demonstrations and funded financially troubled underground newspapers. He also worked with an organization registering voters opposed to the Vietnam War. Lennon wanted to end British police action in Northern Ireland. John and Yoko marched in support of Native American rights. The FBI thought he was involved with a group that planned demonstrations at the 1972 GOP convention. Lennon's meeting with the Black Panthers set off alarm bells at the FBI. But what really got J. Edgar Hoover going was a concert Lennon held for imprisoned White Panther activist John Sinclair. The government locked him up after Sinclair gave marijuana to an undercover agent. The FBI was building a case to get Lennon deported. It pulled this off in 1972 when his visa was revoked on the grounds of a British marijuana conviction in 1968. Republican Senator Strom Thurmond wrote to Nixon's Attorney General, John Mitchell, saying he thought it was a masterful strategic countermeasure, one he'd encouraged prior to Lennon's deportation. The CIA also gathered intelligence on Lennon. Declassified documents show they worked to neutralize his anti-war activities. President Nixon was worried Lennon would swing voters over to Democrat George McGovern during the 1972 election. McGovern ran on a platform advocating withdrawal from the Vietnam War in exchange for the release of American POWs and amnesty for Americans who'd left the country to avoid the draft. McGovern also wanted serious cuts in the military budget. Hoover promised to neutralize what he called the former member of the Beatles singing group. The agency did a number of things, including encouraging the Miami police to arrest Lennon on drug charges. John Lennon knew the FBI was following him and listening in on his phone calls, and he grew increasingly paranoid. It was a time of intense paranoia. Both the FBI and the CIA were conducting subversion and neutralization programs against the anti-war movement, the Black Panthers, Native American, and other nationalist groups. The FBI ran its illegal COINTELPRO and the CIA its Operation Chaos, along with Project Merrimack and Project Resistance. The ultimate effect was achieved by the mid-1970s and the end of the Vietnam War. A serious dysfunction of radical leftist political groups. By 1976, Lennon won a battle to have his deportation overturned. He was no longer involved in politics and spent most of his time secluded at the Dakota raising his young son. He said involvement in politics had almost ruined his career. Lennon was back on the government's radar when he emerged from seclusion and began rebuilding his career. In September 1980, Lennon and Ono signed a contract with the newly formed Geffen Records, and on November 15th, they released Double Fantasy. 3 months later, he was dead. The deep state, or the state within a state, murdered John Lennon. Although he no longer advocated on behalf of leftist causes, he was a potential threat to the state and had to be eliminated. Or as Hoover and the FBI put it, neutralized. It was an interview with Playboy shortly before his death that tipped the scales once again. There's only circumstantial evidence the state murdered John Lennon. Like the assassination of JFK, his brother, and Martin Luther King, there's an array of clues pointing to the state as the culprit. These are routinely dismissed or ignored by the establishment media. Those who believe the state would have influential people killed to silence them are dismissed as lunatics and conspiracy nuts. John Lennon had the ability to influence millions, as he did in the 1960s. Because of this, he represented a serious threat to the state and its controllers, the deep state, the financial elite. Since the 1950s, it has controlled mainstream media and shaped the message. It has employed the FBI, the CIA, military intelligence, and other assets to eliminate threats to its hegemonic rule. George Bernard Shaw said assassination is an extreme form of censorship. It's not clear if Lennon would have once again become politically active. But this is beside the point. The state didn't want to take that chance. It made sure John Lennon was censored once and for all.